Hello, I'm Jamie Johnson. Along with me is Pastor Dennis Nelson here at Bethel Lutheran, our downtown location. And today we're here to talk about the Striving Side-by-Side appeal. First, to introduce myself and give you some background, I'm a former council member and a congregational president. I've also been a participant in each of the last two appeals for capital fundraising for this project, and even before we purchased the Highlands property when we were looking for land. And so we've got some history that is really working here at Bethel, and I thought that I would introduce Pastor, and before we get to that, I want to emphasize that this appeal is much more than just about money. At the heart of it is about the people we have served and will be able to serve because what we've done in our time and what our forebears did in their time. Envisioning the mission to which God has called us, developing the places that make it possible to fulfill that mission as effectively as we know how to do it. Now, as a congregation, we began the adventure of developing a second campus probably more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, closer to 15 actually.
And the outcome has been more than we'd hoped. A useful building that welcomes new worshipers, space for a marvelous preschool that has gained a reputation for excellence in our community, both serving kids and their families, and nearly 500 children registered for Sunday school instruction here at Bethel. Now, being responsible stewards means taking care of what's in their care. And as a congregation, we have stewardship responsibility for our building here downtown, keeping it in good repair and extending its usefulness for years to come. We also have the responsibility for the care of the Highlands campus, and part of that stewardship of what is in our care is retiring the mortgage debt that we owe to Thrive. Now, Pastor Nelson is here to help us understand a little bit more about where we are in the process, what our current debt is, and maybe what this capital appeal, how it can play a role and help us retire that debt completely by the year 2020. Pastor, how are we doing?
We're really doing something quite remarkable together, Jamie. Something that none of us could have done on our own. We started this adventure down the road many years ago by saying, if God is in this, we can do it. And if God isn't in it, there's nothing in the world that we can do to pull it off. And it seems to me, and I think to a lot of people in the congregation, that God has been in this effort. That's how it's been. We are succeeding. And so the very first thing I want to say, Jamie, to you and to everybody else who's been involved, is that my heart is grateful for the effort, for the prayers, for the thoughtfulness, for the contribution certainly, just for the support in general of making a big dream possible for a congregation. None of it could have happened without all of you.
I wholeheartedly agree, Pastor, and I think that you have some charts to help us illustrate this point.
The chart on the screen ought to help you understand where we are with respect to our mortgage debt. You can see that the initial cost of construction was $5.4 million. To this point, we've paid about $800,000 in interest costs. Bethel's leaders have already taken advantage of one opportunity to reduce the rate of interest on our debt, and we're in the process of cutting it another 7/8 of a point now that interest rates are available at lower rates. To this point, two capital appeals have led to wonderful generosity from Bethel people. About $3,700,000 has been given, and $3,400,000 has been used to pay required principal and interest payments. 3 additional large principal reduction amounts have been paid as well. At the present time, we hold about $400,000 in cash for this purpose. We're advised that it's important that money be available for the monthly payments as required, and that there's a reserve of capital that will undoubtedly be needed for a downtown roof repair within the very near term. The result is that our current indebtedness is approximately $2,900,000. That's the major reason for this appeal. Our mortgage debt is set up to be fully paid in 2032. We're now talking about 2 ways to retire the debt by 2020, so don't for a moment overlook the fact that we have done a very, very, very good job in our efforts to raise capital so far. A second chart addresses the thought process by which the goal for this appeal has been set. Our required monthly mortgage payments over the next 3 years will come to about $900,000. The blue bars on the chart show that we've set a target goal of $1.25 million because there is every reason to believe that we can meet that. It would allow us to exceed our amortization requirement, making an additional $225,000 principal payment somewhere within those years. Going rightward on the chart to 2014 and 2017, you see that because interest rates continue at the end of each of those 3-year periods, our indebtedness would be such that another appeal like this one would be necessary. In other words, 2 additional appeals after this one would bring us to the retirement of the debt by 2020. The green bars on the chart show what would happen if we were to meet what we're calling a stretch goal. If, recognizing the fact that it would be wonderful to make this our last major appeal regarding this indebtedness, we could find the generosity and sacrifice required to meet a $2.5 million stretch goal, then things would change a lot. It all depends on when the money comes in, so it's a less precise projection, but big picture, that kind of response would put us in a spot where our debt would be something close to $1 million at the end of 3 years. It would then be possible to incorporate that remaining debt into our general fund budget if support for the budget increases sufficiently, or it would be possible to manage the remaining debt with 2 successive smaller goal appeals over the following 6 years. I'm hearing from some folks that finding a way to make a smaller indebtedness a part of our operating expense would be a happy outcome, and that's an idea that I endorse.
And it's an idea that I endorse as well, along with many other congregational presidents and former leaders who have worked with the church's budget. And this idea of retiring debt is really important because it can, in the long run, allow us to do a lot more with our mission work.
Thank you, Jamie. I really support that. I hope this way of setting the facts of finances in order will ultimately encourage you to be generous, in fact even more generous than we've been in the past together as a congregation. It'll be by a means by which we can retire our debt well ahead of the 2032 deadline that was set by the mortgage when we first took it out, and so reduce interest costs, and so reduce the total amount of funds that will be necessary to raise for this purpose. I sincerely hope so.
It's not too early for any of us to be prayerfully thinking about our part that each of us can take in achieving this goal. And if anyone has any questions, they can certainly contact us by contacting the church, talk to Pastor Nelson or myself, and we really appreciate your involvement in this campaign.
We do.